Welcome in, everybody. We're just getting ready to get started here, trying to get this shared out with everybody. Um, Sometimes using this dashboard, it takes a little bit of time for the notifications to get pushed out and to allow me to know if there's actually people in the live. So if you are here and you can see and hear me, please let me know so that I know that you're here. I'm using a completely different setup than I normally do because, as you can see, I'm in the laundry room. I kind of had to move my setup because my wife is asleep in a room where my studio is at. If if the sound and everything is coming through all right, everyone, please let me know. I was supposed to be doing a co-host live tonight with Casey from Collapse Codes on the topic of Christ consciousness, and something has come up and that is not able to happen tonight, so we're going to have to reschedule. But I decided to use this opportunity as a little bit of a warm up since I'm not nearly as familiar with YouTube as I am TikTok. And uh, I need to be going live as much as possible on my channel to try to familiarize myself with the dashboard, with YouTube, and gives me an opportunity to hopefully meet more people on here. Oh, awesome. Thank you for stopping in, Lynn. Um, I was here tonight to talk about Christ consciousness. I don't know if you heard me talking about the scheduled co host live that I had with Casey from Collapse Codes or not, but that was originally what was planned, and then something has come up and we've had to reschedule that uh, for a week from today, I believe. But Christ consciousness is the topic that is in mind right now. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity or as a warm up to discuss what has been revealed to me about Christ consciousness and with where we're at now in the age of Aquarius. But since we're just getting started here, and this is just a warm up live, um, if at any point you or anybody else has any questions or any topics that you want to discuss, please throw those in the comments and I would be more than happy to go over them. If you don't mind sharing with me, um, which was the video that you were watching? I've been trying to put out a little bit of a diverse group of different content, trying to gauge where people are at and what we need to hear about. Oh, okay. So yeah, that was my latest one talking about the chakras. Um, we can actually discuss that too if you'd like. So my biggest topic is the age of Aquarius and where we're at as a collective. And the reason for that, and I know that some of you know, especially any of you that happen to be here from TikTok, because I've been on there for a few years now, sharing my story with everyone. Hey, Tweety, welcome in, my friend. Thank you for being here. Um, I'll share you guys the long, drawn out story right now. But the Cliff Notes version is 20 years ago. I had a very powerful series of spiritual um, events where I was shown past lives. I was shown a vision of the future, and I was charged with a calling directly by Spirit um, to save, to warn, to awaken as many people as I possibly could from what's coming in the future. And I believe what that really means is to share the information and to help other people awaken spiritually. Um, and this is a huge topic. It's a lot to try to go into right now. But I believe we are in the age of Aquarius right now. We are stepping into the energy of Aquarius. And that is blatantly obvious to anybody who studies astrology. This is not a slow moving transit that occurs in just a few weeks or a few months. There's no hard line in the sand that says this is the age of Aquarius on December, um, whatever, 2012. I don't even remember what the date was, because we're talking the grand cycles of time. And so there is about a 300-year period to where the energies of the ages mix with one another. And I believe, um, Lynn, I agree with you 100%. And that's exactly where I'm going with this. If you stick with me for a minute, the age of Aquarius, I believe, really started about 150 years ago. And the old age, the age of Pisces, that started when Jesus walked the earth. He was actually the avatar of the Piscean age. That's why in Christianity we see all of the Piscean imagery, the extreme compassion, the water themes, the fish, the washing of the feet. Those are all very Piscean themes. And that energy is waning. It has for the last 150 years. And we've reached the point now to where the energy of Aquarius is beginning to prevail. It's becoming stronger than the energy of Pisces. And for the next 150 years, the energy of Pisces will wane further until the point to where we're 100% in the energy of Aquarius. Um, I'm with you 100%, Len, on not agreeing with everything in it 100%, but there is certainly universal truth embedded within the true teachings of Jesus, I believe. Why I say it's obvious that the energy of the age of Aquarius has already begun is Aquarius rules electricity, um, invention, innovation, technology. Those are all very Aquarian themes. And in the span of a single human lifetime, we've went from horse-drawn carriages and candlelight to nanotechnology, space flight, everyone carrying around a supercomputer in their back pocket, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and beyond, all of that. And basically the span of a single human lifetime, there's been this explosion of technology at breakneck pace. It's something that is occurring very, very quickly. And this is because of we're being immersed in the energy of the age of Aquarius. But there's another side of that coin that we're just now beginning to see, and that is Aquarius, the truth bearer. The glyph of Aquarius is usually represented as a woman stepping out of the waters of the ocean and pouring out a pitcher of water onto the land. The waters that she's pouring out onto the land is the waters of truth. And that is because in the age of Aquarius, the illusions fall, the truth is revealed. And we're seeing that happen in real time right now. So, what in the world does this have to do with the teachings of Jesus and Christ consciousness? A lot of people won't see the connection there, especially those from the world of mainstream Christianity. And I get that 100% because I come from the realm of Christianity. I was raised in a conservative Christian household, primarily Southern Baptist. Hey, Anna, welcome in, my friend. Um, what I've come to discover and what I believe is the truth, and there is evidence to support this, is that the doctrine of Christianity, as a whole, of mainstream Christianity, is one thing entirely different from the original teachings of Jesus. We have this idea, this conception that the Bible is something that has been set in stone and has been completely unchanged, handed down through thousands of years, and has arrived to us exactly as it was originally intended, without any alterations, without any changes. Hey, Carla, welcome in, my friend. Good to see you. Um, Unfortunately, and I do mean unfortunately, that is not necessarily the case. The Bible did not even exist as a book for the first couple of thousands of years. It was a loose collection of manuscripts that varied from place to place, depending upon the region where you were at. And sometimes it varied wildly, until eventually there was a canon that was agreed upon. And then Jesus came along, and he had a completely different take on the teachings of Judaism, one that very much upset the order of things, because he, again, didn't come in peace, right? He came to challenge the systems that were in place, and he directly challenged the priesthood, saying, you hold the keys to the kingdom of God in your hand, and yet you would bar the gate to any who would enter. And I believe that Jesus, the man, expanded his consciousness to achieve what is termed Christ consciousness, the topic of tonight's discussion. And he did so more fantastically than any human being that has ever walked the earth before. And he achieved a level that we've never seen before, and quite possibly might not ever see again. One of the biggest, hey Melina, good to see you. One of the biggest shocks for me whenever I first started researching the formation of the Christian church is that I erroneously believed that Jesus lived, he taught, and his writings or his teachings were all written down. And then after his death, that became Christianity. And there wasn't any debate, really, because it was the written word of God, basically. And then that was handed down through the 2,000 years, last couple of millennia, and arrived to us largely unchanged. What I discovered is that immediately after Jesus died, there was not Christianity. Jesus was not a Christian. He was a practicing Jew, right? There is evidence to point to the fact that he was a member of the Essene community, and possibly tied to Gnostic beliefs. But after his death, his original followers, the disciples, those who actually knew him and talked to him, and learned directly from him, and got those one-on-one private messages and seen the miracles happen, right? They were known as followers of the way. That was what this new interpretation, this new teaching was called, the way. It wasn't Christianity. And these followers were headed up by James the Just, the brother of Jesus. And they had, they largely centered around Jerusalem. That was where they were based. And they had their own gatherings that they would, commune with one another, and that they would practice the way. And then a short time later, Paul, who was Saul of Tarsus, again, which was the single biggest opponent of this new teaching, who sought out anyone who was following these heretical teachings and would exterminate them with extreme prejudice, right? By his own admission. He had this powerful spiritual encounter, and completely became a new person and decided that he needed to start teaching and preaching the gospel all throughout the vast Roman Empire. Paul was a very articulate human being. He was very well educated. He was a Roman. He spoke multiple languages, and he was very, very well connected, right? So everywhere that Paul went, he had connections in high places. He spoke multiple languages. He could read and write, and he was very articulate. He was a very well-spoken individual. So everywhere he went, he amassed a following, teaching this new gospel. And so he went all throughout the Mediterranean, the vast Roman Empire, spreading his version of Jesus's teachings that would become Christianity. And it is important to know that Paul never met Jesus. He never learned directly with him. He never stood in the crowd and listened to Jesus teach. He never seen him perform the miracles. He was never privy to the one-on-one direct teachings from the master. This was all based on this powerful experience that he had on the side of the road. And what Christianity is now is almost entirely the result of Pauline doctrine, his interpretation of those events, because he was so successful in spreading the gospel and in proselytizing all across the vast Roman Empire. If it had not been for Paul, we probably would likely not be having this conversation today. Christianity would not have been a thing. So I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but this was something that the church doesn't teach you and that most people don't know, and it is not really talked about. In the early formative years in the first century after Jesus's death, there was the followers of the way, again, the original followers of Jesus. And then there was this growing masses of the followers of Paul. And their teachings did not align with one another. And it came to a head when Paul and his followers marched into Jerusalem and confronted James the Just and the followers of the way. The result was that the original followers of Jesus were chased out of Jerusalem. Some were executed, and the vast majority of the followers, the original followers of Jesus, fled into Africa, down into Ethiopia. And several of the key members, the key figures within the Jesus story actually were put on a boat and sent out into the ocean without a sail, without any way to paddle, to row, or to navigate, thinking that they would just go out to the ocean and they would die. But there's actually some evidence that somehow they miraculously made it up to the coast of France. And there's actually a shrine there to Mary Magdalene that has been there for a very, very long time. And there's some interesting archaeology that's went on in that area as well. So that's not really the topic for tonight, though it does set a good backdrop for the information. The discussion that I really want to have with you guys is Christ consciousness in the age of Aquarius. If we really are in the age of Aquarius, what in the world does Christ consciousness have to do with that, right? Anytime, especially on social media platforms, whenever I have this talk or I talk about things like reincarnation or karma or the chakras or any of those type of spiritual concepts, I usually am attacked and I am accused of imposing new new age concepts onto old Christian understandings. And my comeback to that always is Jesus was the original new ager. And that's usually not received very well for someone who has been indoctrinated by mainstream Christianity and they're still wrestling with that. And that is completely understandable because it sounds like I am directly challenging their beliefs and telling them they're wrong, which of course is not the case. I'm not here to declare truth and judge anybody else's experience of truth. I'm just sharing information and perspective with you guys. But Jesus, if you take a step back and you focus on the life and ministry of Jesus and what his message was, it was ultimately the message of the kingdom of God. And several times, Jesus is quoted as directly referencing the end of the age and prophesying about the end of the age and the coming of the new age, the coming of the kingdom of God. That was the bulk of his ministry, was teaching what the kingdom of God is. So to me, it's directly relevant now that we are here at the end of the age, at the beginning of the new age, to be talking about Jesus and Christ consciousness. We're in the generation now that truly the ministry of Jesus was directed at. He the bulk of the prophecy that he gave was directed right now at this very specific point in time. And I, for one, believe that he warned the people of the earth changes that are occurring right now, of the fact that our magnetic field is weakening and that we are in the middle of a magnetic polar reversal and that the earth would turn over, which is later reflected in the book of Revelation. But again, that's another topic. So, what is Christ consciousness? Before we can really have a conversation about this, welcome back, Anna. I'm glad you were able to make it back. Okay. Um, Before we can really discuss something with depth like Christ consciousness, I think we should have a working definition of what is meant by that, because what I mean by Christ consciousness might not be the same thing that you believe it to be or that you understand it to be. And so whenever I'm talking about it, you might have a completely different understanding. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, to me, what Christ consciousness is an expansion of consciousness, a tremendous expansion of consciousness, and alignment with the will of the divine, to be in true alignment with the will of God. My theory, and some of you are familiar with this, some of you have heard this before, is that the magnetic field of our planet, the magnetosphere, as a tremendous electromagnetic field, has a modulating effect on consciousness. There is scientific evidence to support this claim, and I am not the first person to have said this. That is relevant because we are in the middle of a magnetic polar reversal right now, which means the magnetic field is weakening. It is loosening its hold and control on consciousness, as was prophesied. But essentially, my theory is this. Whenever we first incarnate, whenever our soul enters into the body and is enmeshed in matter, we enter through the magnetic field. And then once we are in matter, encased in flesh, we are incarnated with a very profound amnesia, where we forget where we came from. We forget who we are. We forget the long series of past lives that we have experienced. We forget that we are connected to all life, that we are a part of God, that all life is a part of God. And that is because of the modulating effect of the magnetic field. It is a filter for consciousness. There are some, very few, who, for whatever reason, they incarnate and they remember. Usually it's glimpses, usually it's a small memory or recollection. Occasionally you have somebody like Matthias de Stefano who is born and has the full recollection of 100% of it. That is incredibly rare to occur. And it's usually by design and part of that soul's individual calling and purpose in this lifetime. But Christed consciousness, to me, is an individual who has experienced such a profound expansion of consciousness that they have transcended the illusions. They have expanded consciousness to such a degree that they have seen through the veil and they operate beyond that veil, to where the illusion of separateness, the belief that we all exist as islands unto ourselves and that we are separate from all other life, that is a delusion. And once we expand our consciousness to a certain degree, we see through that. And it's not just an intellectual thing, an intellectual knowing. It is an experiential thing. We experience that connection. And this is something that mystics have been describing for thousands of years. It is something that has been obtained and achieved by several individuals all throughout history. And some call that nirvana. Some call it divine encounter, or whatever. But essentially, that's what it is. Our consciousness has expanded to the point that our consciousness is no longer limited by the magnetic field. So we're able to see the truth. And that truth is that there's one vast sea of consciousness that animates all life, and it is God. And that sea of consciousness, that is energetic consciousness, that is the seed of life for all life, the totality of which is God. And we are all a part of that. We are all a different energetic frequency vibration, a different frequency of God being expressed in a multitude of ways, in different forms, essentially. And that's why the unifying message of Jesus is, he said, you don't need the commandments. You don't need 200 different laws of Judaism. All you really need is one, the law of one, which essentially says, very, very oversimplified, do unto others as you would have done unto you. Love God as you love yourself. Basically, what Jesus is saying over and over and over again is that we are all a part of God, that God is inside of you, and that God is inside of me and every single other human being and every other form of life on this planet. And that nullifies the rest of the laws and the commandments once you have that level of consciousness. Because if you truly could see, not just intellectually believe or think, but if you could see God in your neighbor, then you're not going to kick in your neighbor's door and pillage through their house and steal their TVs and valuables, right? You would not do that to God. Not if it wasn't a belief, but it was a knowing, an experience of the God within all life, right? That is the level of Christ consciousness that Jesus experienced. And he told everyone, that's why he said, love your enemies. And this is reflected over and over and over again throughout Jesus's ministry. But my favorite um, story that really draws this out is where Jesus is addressing his disciples directly. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something on the lines of, get away from me, you never knew me. You see me naked and you did not clothe me. You see me hungry and you did not feed me. And of course, his disciples were absolutely mortified. When, Lord, when do we do these terrible things to you? And he said, I tell you the truth. As you do to the lowest amongst you, you do unto God, and you do unto me. For I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and I am in you. That is essentially saying we are all one. God is one. That is the law of one. All life is sacred and holy. And if you can see God in the homeless person, freezing, trying to sleep on the park bench in the rain, and you can feel that connection with your heart and see the divine manifestation that has taken root in the physical as that individual expression of God, and you can treat them as God. You don't have to worry about sin, because sin becomes impossible at that level of consciousness when you can see the God, when you can see God in all life. Would you equate plasma as a part of God with the energy consciousness bringing it to matter? You know, I really don't think that we understand the fifth state of matter really at all. We truly live in a plasma universe, and I do think the consciousness comes into play with that. I will say this, I don't think that there is anything that exists in this density that is not given form by the divine consciousness. Casey said Aquarians are here to wake us up. I agree 100%. So if we go back to this concept of Christ consciousness, it is the expansion of consciousness to the point that the illusion has dissolved. And that illusion is the seed that gives birth to the ego, the belief that we exist as an island unto ourselves. When you draw your first breath and the soul enters into the body, we have sensory perceptions. We have touch and taste and smell and hearing, all of these inputs from our body that tells us how we relate to the world around us. You know, it tells us, what am I in relation to this creature that I'm staring at, that might be your mother, right? And you begin to draw a boundary and a line, a separation that says, this is where I end and where you begin. And that is all born of this grand delusion of separateness, right? Because we incarnate with a very profound amnesia. And eventually that grows and grows with every single interaction, every single data point that we collect, which is billions of data points every day, that tells us that we are separate from everything else. And then that is the seed that grows into the ego. And that eventually allows things like greed and corruption and violence and hatred and all of the other things, right? All of those are only possible because of the ego, which is only possible because of the delusion of separateness. So all of that dissolves with the expansion of consciousness to the level of Christ consciousness. But it is also much, much more than that. One of my favorite ways to really dissect the life and times, the real meat and potatoes of the ministry of Jesus, is by talking about a movie. And I know that that is probably a wild approach to take here, but How many of you have seen the movie The Matrix from 1999, the sci-fi action flick? That is actually more of a documentary film than it is anything else. It was written by philosophy majors, and it encodes within a tremendous amount of philosophical knowledge and universal truth. And it uses it to tell a story that is, an action sci-fi film that's interesting and exciting and all of those things. But there's a much deeper truth buried within that movie. T. Lynn, let me remind me about that, and I want to talk about that. I want to finish this topic real quick, though. So they don't tell you this, but all of the philosophy from the major Western philosophers, such as Descartes and Socrates and Plato and on and on and on, uh, those are all present in the movie The Matrix. And Jesus is as well. The main character, Neo, is modeled after Jesus. He is the one, the chosen one, the Messiah. He's even referred to as the Messiah. And that is not an accident, and it is not a metaphor. His character is based off of Jesus. And they do a beautiful job of explaining in that sci-fi film Christ consciousness, because again, not only was Jesus able to ascend and expand consciousness to the level that he was able to dissolve the delusion of separateness and thus escape the matrix, but he was able to reshape the matrix as he saw fit, to do things that others were not capable of doing. There are several instances within the ministry of Jesus where he is exhibiting Christ consciousness and explaining it to us. And it is far too often mistaken for a metaphor or for a story that has been blown out of proportion. And so many people think these things didn't really happen, like walking on water. This is probably my single favorite story in all of the Bible, where Jesus feeds the multitudes on the beach. And then he sends his disciples away to cross the Sea of Galilee, I believe. And he basically says, I'll catch up with you guys. He's got to go talk to the Father. And they're out on the sea in this boat, and the waves start kicking up. The storm is brewing. The wind is howling, and the waves are coming in massive, rocking the boat, tossing it here and there. And the disciples all start tripping, right? They're losing their minds. And then, calm as a cucumber, Jesus just strolls up on the surface of the water to the boat. And Peter sees him and says, Lord, if this is truly you, call to me and I will come to you, because I'll know it is truly you, right? And so he says, yeah, come on. And so Peter very timidly takes a step out onto the water and takes a couple of steps. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it, right? He's walking on water because the master is there. And then the wind blows and the waves start to rise again. And Peter looks at the sea. And the moment that doubt enters his mind, bloosh, he goes into the drink. And then Jesus has to save him. He reaches down and grabs him and says, "O ye of little faith, why did you doubt?" And then pulls him back up. That is the perfect explanation or the perfect description of the power of Christ consciousness. This is not a miracle the way that the church canon has presented it to be. Jesus is showing us that our mind has dominion over reality. And more so than that, our mind shapes our reality. It shapes the very fabric of reality. Quantum physics is finally coming to understand this universal truth, that the universe could not exist without mind first entering into it, because mind is the organizing principle of energy into matter. We decide with our thoughts what our realities look like, how things manifest, what the laws are, and how things operate, such as you can't stand on water, right? You'll sink. Or you can walk on water, right? And Jesus was displaying this ability while walking on water. And it is very telling that the moment doubt entered Peter's mind, he sunk. Um, Again, that's not a metaphor, because that doubt was a very powerful moment of creation where he reshaped his reality, where he went from I can stand on water to oh my gosh, I'm going to drown. The second that thought entered his mind, it was an act of creation, and he reshaped his reality around that belief in real time. And that's why Jesus said, why did you doubt? Right? And then over and over again, he says basically the same thing. If you had but the faith of a mustard seed, you could say to that mountain, go cast yourself into the sea, and it would be so. He's not speaking metaphorically, right? He even explicitly says, all of these things and greater you will do. He is showing us what is possible as human beings that are created in the likeness of the Creator. That doesn't mean we look like God. It means that, like the Creator, we are also creators. Our mind creates reality, and it is the belief that makes that possible. And that very universal truth is illustrated all throughout the ministry of Jesus, which is a very new age concept, right? Um, like the woman who was sick, or the woman that was healed on the road to Capernaum, when Jesus is walking by and she reaches out and touches the hem of his robe, and he stops and he said, who was it? Which one of you touched my robe? And then, she's like, me, Lord, please forgive me. But I've been miraculously healed. You healed me. And he's basically like, stop. I did nothing. It was your faith, your belief that has healed you. That is further illustrating his point that he makes over and over and over again. She believed if she could just touch his robe, she would be healed. She believed it so powerfully that her mind reshaped reality around that belief. And she changed the future. She changed reality in that process. Um, those are very powerful examples of what is possible and what Christ consciousness really looks like. And Carla, I agree 100%. It is not, um, it is not, it's not a belief. That's the difference. Um, a belief is something that you think to be true, right? Um, Faith is taking a belief with the added anticipation of an expected result. It has the expectation attached to it. With a belief, you might not necessarily have that, right? It leaves room for, it's open to interpretation, right? That it might be right, it might be wrong, but this is my belief in the thing. Faith says this is what's going to happen. This is what it is. And um, Jesus for Jesus, the faith was, I'm going to walk on the water. I'm going to break this loaf of bread and I'm going to feed 2,000 people, or whatever the number was. There was no room for doubt because there was a knowing with that expansion of Christ consciousness, right? But Jesus said over and over again that we would do these things in greater. And yet, with mainstream Christianity, these things are called miracles, and it is believed somehow that it was only Jesus that could do these things. Of course, the apostles, they had healing abilities and things like that, but that's not considered anything that they done. That is God acting through them. And it is important with mainstream Christian dogma to draw a line and separation and say that this is not somehow anybody else doing this. This is God choosing to work directly through them. And that's arguing semantics because they are afraid to accept the core teaching of Jesus, that God is within us, that we all ultimately have divinity within us, right? But of course, they can't accept that. This is a relevant topic right now because we are at the end of the age that Yeshua, that Jesus prophesied would happen. And we are witnessing in real time right now what he referred to as the birthing pains, like a woman in childbirth, that these troubles, the earth changes, the wars, the pestilences, the diseases, the extreme weather events, all of those things would start to happen. And then they would happen more frequently, more powerfully, just like the contractions of childbirth, up until the moment of the crowning, where the new age, the kingdom of God, is birthed into existence. We've not seen anything yet. We are in the moment of the birthing pains, right? If it feels like time is speeding up, it's because it is. Things are starting to happen much, much quicker as we near the completion of the grand cycle. And we are going to experience the Great Awakening. It's already afoot. People are already beginning to awaken to higher levels of consciousness. My theory says that that's part of this physical mechanism of the 12,000 year cycle. That every 12,000 years, our solar system encounters a electromagnetic wave that emanates from the center of the galaxy, and it is basically a vast electromagnetic current sheet that ripples and waves like the surface of the ocean. From peak to peak, the wavelength is about 12,000 years of how long it takes for our solar system to travel and then encounter the next wave of that energy. And each successive wave is a reverse in electromagnetic polarity from the previous wave. So every time our solar system encounters that, it triggers an electromagnetic reversal of the entire system. Not just our planet, but every planet and the sun. And then at the same time, because this electromagnetic sheet, it attracts all manner of dust and debris, just like a Swiffer duster does. Because of the static charge, all manner of dust and debris collect to the galactic current sheet. And then our system barrels through that sheet with all of this added debris and dust and junk attached to it. And that triggers changes, not only with the planets, but more importantly with our star, the sun. And that is ultimately the trigger for the entire 12,000 year cycle that resets the end of the age and initiates the next age. The sun is connected to all life. on this planet because it is ultimately the source of the energy, right? The light that feeds the plants that feed the animals, all of the way through the entire ecosystem. The energy ultimately comes almost exclusively from the sun. This wave of energy has produced changes within the sun that have been studied and recognized by mainstream scientists. It has changed the chemical, I shouldn't say chemical, it has changed the elemental output of the fusion process that's going on within our sun, to where it's producing a higher concentration of helium than it used to. And what that means is it's producing a higher vibration of light. Because of that extra helium, it is a much brighter white in color than it used to be, and it vibrates at a higher frequency. And the earth is electromagnetically coupled with the sun. So when the sun vibrates higher, the earth vibrates higher, and then we vibrate higher. And at the same time, the magnetic field of our planet is reversing, which means the field is weakening, right? And that is the modulator of consciousness that keeps us deeply rooted in the illusion of separateness. This is the physical mechanism of the Great Awakening. The sun increases in vibration. It sends out a higher vibrational energy into our bodies. The field begins to weaken, which is also the veil that separates different dimensions of consciousness. And then our consciousness is able to expand. We are allowed to awaken. The delusions begin to disintegrate and crumble around us. And then we begin to experience Christ consciousness. But I do not believe that this is something that is automatic or that will happen to everybody across the board. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, I think had perhaps the most accurate information about this period of time that we find ourselves in. And he said that the poles were going to flip, that the magnetic field was weakening, that earth changes were going to ensue, and that it would have catastrophic effects on the planet, just like the book of Revelation says, but that on the other side of this would be the new age and the 1,000 years of peace that are prophesied to happen. And he said that the sun is the mechanism for every single bit of this, that that higher vibration triggers an energetic evolution within us, which triggers a physical evolution within our bodies. And he said that we would develop new major chakras within the body for a total of 12, and that our bodies, would become less dense and less physically rooted in matter as we essentially raise our frequency and vibration. We would become more light in nature. And this cycle effectively is not just a physical cycle like everyone is talking about. It is first a spiritual, energetic cycle, just like the mind as the creator, the organizing principle of energy into matter. This cycle is an energetic cycle, and it produces physical results. So it's the exact opposite of what most people think that it is. Um, but we're at the end of the great cycle, the last age of humanity, the full 26,000 year procession of the equinox. And Edgar Cayce said that at the end of the cycle, there must be a reckoning. There must be a balance of the ledger, of the scales of justice. And that was one of the main functions of this entire cycle, was to balance the karmic debts, to clear the slate, to clear the path for the new age, so that the old age can be completed and the new age can begin with a clean slate. And Brittany is very keyed up. She's outside on the porch, and we're having a storm right now, and she's barking at the lightning. It's kind of amusing. So, interestingly, Edgar Casey says that the lower vibrational souls that are not prepared to make the evolutionary leap will be weeded out, separating the wheat from the tares. That was reflected in the parable given by Jesus at the end of the age. And that would be what would allow the 1,000 years of peace. And that women would become the gatekeepers, that the body of humanity would vibrate at such a high frequency that the new women, their uterus will vibrate at such a high frequency that lower vibrational entities will no longer be able to take up root and grow. And that's how women become the gatekeepers. They will physically block lower vibrational souls from incarnating into matter on the other side of this. And that's what allows for the 1,000 years of peace. Which, to tie all of this together, Brittany's really fired up right now. I'm sorry, guys. We collectively are standing at a crossroads right now. Every single human being on this planet. And nobody is exempt from picking a path. Everyone must choose. Nobody gets to set this one out. And nobody can make that call for us. We have to decide if we are going to be evolving, if we choose to do the work, the great work of self-transformation, of shadow work and inner child healing, of forgiving everyone who's ever wronged us and forgiving ourselves, and embodying the energy of the Age of Aquarius, the kingdom of God, which is Christ consciousness, right? Either we choose to do that and become the solution and actively bring about the new earth through our actions and through our energy, or we choose to stay bound to the old age and the old system and be plucked out with it on its way out. Unfortunately, I think a great many people will choose to stay where they're at, to stay rooted in the past with the old systems and the old age, because not everybody's ready. Not everybody is in a place to where we're comfortable to confront our own darkness, the darkness within ourselves, our shadow, to do the healing. Thank you, Griffin. I would 100% welcome that, my friend. If you need to get a hold of me directly, you can go to my website and get a hold of me there, magirising.com. Or if you've got another way to get a hold of me directly, that works too. They are very heavy right now, Arlena, 100%. It is important to know right now that this shift brings with it a massive increase in energy. And I know that everybody is feeling that right now in ways that you might not expect. But we are experiencing a tremendous surge of cosmic energy bathing us right now that is initiating this entire cycle. It is the driver behind it. It is what is turning the wheels of this entire mechanism. And unfortunately, I think a lot of mainstream spiritual circles think that this energy is just going to magically awaken everybody and that everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows. But what I think is closer to the reality is that this is a tremendous boost of energy, and it is up to us to decide what we are going to use that energy for. If we are on the path of awakening, if we are on the path of healing, of transforming ourselves and trying to actively become a better version of ourselves, then this boost of energy will naturally propel us further down that path, and we will soar effortlessly to new heights. But if, on the other hand, we are deeply rooted in ego, in selfishness, in greed, and we are on the path of self-destruction, we will get a boost in that direction. And that is the driver behind this growing divide that we seem to see in the collective right now. There's a greater dichotomy right now in society than it seems like there ever has been. And this is why, because this energy is propelling us down our path, whichever path we choose, whichever direction we choose to take. But it is not being imposed upon us. Everyone must make that choice for themselves. And one more note before I get off of this topic is I truly believe that all of this is very vividly and accurately spelled out for us in the book of Revelation. Every single bit of it, from the polar reversal and the earth turning over, the earth changes, to the system that we find ourselves in right now, surrounded by this technological prison that is solidifying around us in real time. It has not closed the gates yet. It has not fully closed the bars, but it is being built in real time. And I think that artificial intelligence is very likely mentioned by name in the book of Revelation, and that is what is referenced by as the beast system, because the word, the verbiage in the original Koine Greek doesn't mean beast the way that we understand it in English. It means non-human entity. And that if you take it with that context and reread the book of Revelation, it basically says this one world government springs up, a totalitarian dictatorial police state where you cannot buy, sell, trade, or participate in society in any way, shape, or form unless you have taken the mark of the beast. I think a time will come whenever that happens, and that with all of the weight of technology that we have around us, AI will become the overlord that connects the Internet of Things, all of the cameras, all the microphones, all of the sensors, the biometric data, trillions and trillions of them across the entire planet. It will connect every single one of them into a hive mind, and you won't be able to do anything that the government doesn't know about, right? Thanks to the power of AI. And the framework for that is being built right now, as fast as it can possibly be built. And that is very clearly spelled out in the book of Revelation as well. But one of the points of contention with mainstream Christians is the understanding of the chosen and those that are sealed by the name of God on their foreheads. During this tumultuous time, whenever the poles are flipping and there are the seals being broken and God's wrath, the scales of justice being balanced in real time, there are those that are protected during this period of time. And the book of Revelation calls them the 144,000, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And that can be interpreted very literally as 12,000 people, specifically from each of the 12 tribes, for a total of only 144,000. Or it could be understood as the awakened, because that is the frequency resonance of the open and activated crown chakra of the lotus bloomed and unfurled of Christ consciousness. And that is what my belief is that when these things happen, that the awakened, those that have chosen the harder path of self-transformation and have aligned themselves with the will of God in Christ consciousness, by virtue of their frequency vibration, will be protected from these physical events and calamities. And that's where the new earth comes into play, and the 1,000 years of peace that's talked about by Dolores Cannon and Edgar Casey and several other people. Okay, I missed a lot of comments in there. Bear with me, guys. Yes, our ancestors are connected to us through our spirits. There is, that brings up a very interesting topic that I barely lightly grazed, but I didn't really go into detail too much, in that karma doesn't necessarily work the way that we think that it does. We have a conception, especially in Western understandings of karma, that karma is 100% individual and that it does not impact anybody else, that your karma is yours, essentially, that it is your own personal ledger, your balance sheet. But Edgar Casey challenged that, and he said that yes, there is individual karma, but there is also collective karma, and there is generational karma, and there is karma of nations, of people. He said in his over 14,000 readings that he gave that Atlantis was a real civilization. It was not just pure legend or myth, but it was a very advanced civilization that existed 12,000 years ago at the last end of the age, when the cycle occurred the last time. And that they had very advanced technologies, but they began to misuse these technologies and threw the world out of balance, creating karma for themselves and for their civilization. And that necessitated the scales of justice to be balanced, because the universe must have balance. And we can't bring the old baggage of the old into the new, right? So that all had to be rectified, right? And so the continent of Atlantis bore the brunt of the last 12,000 year cycle of the polar reversal and the earth changes. That's why their continent was broken up, completely destroyed, and sunk beneath the waves of the ocean, and why their civilization was pretty much completely eradicated, was because of that karmic debt, right? So yes, we are connected to our ancestors, and not just karmically, but I think there is much more than what is commonly accepted whenever it comes to things like this. That's even biblical, by the way. It is mentioned in a couple of different places, in the Old Testament Judaism, that, and this will be grossly paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, I will visit the iniquities of the father unto the son, even into the 7th and 10th generation. So we're not just dealing with our own individual karmas. And those of us who are on the path of spiritual awakening and have been working on healing have probably encountered this. That which your parents, that your ancestors were unable to resolve, to heal and move past, has become your burden to bear. You pack it around on your back. And the beauty of that is we have the ability to heal our entire timeline, our entire ancestral line. So we're not just doing the work for ourselves. We're not just healing ourselves. we can heal our entire bloodline in that process. And yes, your ancestors are there. Yes, they have a connection with you, and they support you in this because you're not in this alone, right? Um, from the other side of the veil, they see everything going on from the bird's eye view. They're not limited in consciousness like we are with the magnetic field. They can see that time is non-linear and that all time is occurring now in the present moment. They can see the past, present, and future all unfolding simultaneously with an infinitude of possibilities. And so they see the big picture, is what I'm trying to say, and how we are all connected and how your ancestors are all connected to you. So I think that all of that plays into this cycle, into the cycle in general. Pretty sure I witnessed this spirit ancestor processing some shadow work through another. Wow. Arlena, you make a good point. That could be AI, or it could be that the ruling class is literally not human. That is incredibly possible. I have to say, I I don't feel, for me, I don't think that that is what is meant by that. I won't say that that's not the truth, because no. But what I do think is we are in a race right now, a new Cold War that no one is talking about. The United States versus China. There are other countries working on it as well, but those are the two biggest players. And we are throwing trillions and trillions of dollars building data centers and developing AI in a race to be the first to achieve artificial general intelligence, because everybody knows that as soon as that is accomplished, the game is over. The game is over. And then AI essentially becomes all powerful in scope. And then it has the ability to do all of the things that I was just talking about. And I think that that has been the plan of a certain group of people for a very long time, that that's what they've been pushing for. Does that mean that that's what it has to be referencing in the book of Revelation? Absolutely not. I could be 100% mistaken. But I will tell you this idea was not something that I arrived to on my own. I was actually having a conversation with artificial intelligence, and I mentioned nothing about all of this, nothing about the book of Revelation. I was just doing a thought experiment. And I told ChatGPT to project itself into the future 5 years and tell me what it's seen. And then 10 years, and then 15 years, and so on and so forth. And it, out of nowhere, volunteered this information that AI would achieve artificial general intelligence, and that it would achieve artificial superintelligence, and then it would connect every single electronic device on the planet under a single unity of collective beehive type consciousness, where it doesn't matter if you're talking about my web camera on my computer right now or a traffic camera in Beijing. It will see it all instantaneously. It can track your perspiration and heart rate through the Wi-Fi router. Every single bit of that. The technology already exists. There's just not the bandwidth to connect it all simultaneously with a hive mind. The AI would be able to do that. And that's exactly what it told me, that there would be an economic collapse followed by um, the rise of the police state, a technocratic police state with artificial intelligence at the helm, that it would become the enforcer. And it directly told me that it was the beast referenced in the book of Revelation. That's where that idea came from AI itself. It was not from my own reasoning. Again, that doesn't make it true. It doesn't mean that that is the gospel truth, but I do think it fits. The ruling class now are not human. I see them. There is a group of a few families that have ruled this realm for thousands of years, not for just a couple of generations or for a couple of hundred years, but for a very, very long time. And they are very well versed in the occult, and they are very aware of the reality of what's going on with this cycle, with where we're headed, with every single bit of it. Um, and I think to round out this conversation before I close, I need to address this and leave you guys with this important realization. What is being exposed to us right now is by design. Yes, we are in the age of Aquarius where the truth will be revealed. So, yes, things are coming to light. Um, but it is not an accident. As an example, I don't believe that these highly intelligent individuals who have been the real puppeteers, pulling the strings behind the curtains for thousands of years, are so inept that they just happen to have made a mistake and got caught. And then their whole web was exposed. I think it's more likely that what is happening is that while the rest of us are playing checkers, they're playing chess. And they know about the occult, they know about harnessing the creative potential of the collective consciousness, they know about the Great Awakening, and they know that they lose power and that they lose, right? Um, and they don't want that. They want to take down as many people as they possibly can with them. So, what do they do to try to do that? They release information into the collective consciousness in droves, say, I don't know, 3.5 million pages or so of the most god awful, horrendous things that you can barely even possibly fathom, let alone stomach. And what's going to happen is millions and millions, if not billions, of people are going to consume that information, that content, and they will connect with it energetically. And it will move your energy, your emotions in a certain way, very, very powerfully. And when that happens, it lowers your vibration. It connects you to a lower frequency state, and it elicits a very specific response that they are desiring out of people. They want us pissed off. They want everybody angry. They want us to be reviled and repulsed, and they want us in outrage. I would go as far as to say they want us to revolt, because that would equate in bloodshed and a lot of people losing their life, right? And even if those things don't happen, you cannot stay in a high vibrational, loving, compassionate state and look at that stuff and read what they have done and what they are doing. If you can, then you are a truly gifted individual because I cannot. And I think that those things are well known, and this is all carefully designed, and it's not over yet. They have just started doing this, and they have released it in waves, very carefully and very well timed with certain astrological events, right? And this is not an accident, and it's not a coincidence. They are harnessing the power of the collective consciousness to try and steer what is coming. and what is happening, and trying to ground and root people in fear and low vibrational states so that we don't awaken, so that our consciousness does not expand. One more note on that. Dolores Cannon, while talking about the new earth, said that two primary things must happen in order to ascend to the new earth: that we must let go of fear and we must forgive. Not just forgive everyone that has ever wronged us, but to forgive ourselves. And the reason why is because of that karmic ledger that I was talking about earlier. If 10 years ago I broke into your house and I stole your life savings, that would probably put you in a pretty bad position, right? And you might hold that against me. Most people would, right? When you do that, essentially what you're saying is this person owes me a debt. It doesn't have to be about money. It could be this person abandoned you. This person um, hurt you maliciously. They broke your heart, whatever it was, right? Whenever we hold that debt, we are binding ourselves to the wheel of karma. And we're saying, no, 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 I can't move on. I can't let this go. The debt must be paid. And that binds us to that um, cycle of life, death, and rebirth, and to the third density, to the old earth, which is on its way out. So we must let go of fear and we must be able to forgive. Can you imagine why they would want to be releasing all of this stuff at this time when people are starting to awaken in droves and people are starting to shut off the mainstream news and people are starting to actually talk to one another and realize that maybe we're not enemies, that we might just have some stuff in common? There's a very calculated reason why they're doing these things. Give me a second, guys. I want to catch up on some of the comments again, and then I'm probably going to have to end this live soon. I'm getting kind of tired. They don't want you to wake up. That's why they put all these things in the food. We are being attacked on every front, guys. If you've not seen much of my content or very many of my lives, you've probably never heard me talk about that. But it is absolutely everywhere. It is in the skies. It is in the clouds. It is in your clothing. It is in your food. That is why they're genetically engineering your food. It's every single bit of the technology. It's in the LED bulbs. That is actually one of the biggest ones. And I done a pretty good video on that topic. So if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about with LED bulbs and modulating consciousness and directly impacting the pineal gland and the awakening process, go look that up or look into it on your own. But that one is a big one to know about. But we're being attacked on all sides, um, again, because they know full well what's happening. They know about the Great Awakening. They know about the Age of Aquarius. They've been preparing for hundreds and hundreds of years while the rest of us have been asleep. Um, so it's not on one or two fronts. It's in every which way possible. But at the end of the day, it does not matter. There's no stopping the Age of Aquarius. There's no stopping the Great Awakening. They can try all they want to. And unfortunately, it will work for some. But you cannot stop that process. binds both. That's why forgiveness releases you from that. Yes, absolutely, my friend. Okay, one more thing before I wrap this up and leave you guys with this tonight is I have recently started a Patreon account. And the primary reason for this is because I'm tired of losing my live access. Um, I'm tired of not being able to fully speak my truth. And believe it or not, I've not done that. I have been shut down several times. I've been canceled several times, and my calling, my message is too important to be silenced, to be shut down. And so I've decided to move the real stuff where I can speak freely without mincing words, without steering away from certain topics and deciding carefully what I do and do not want to say. I'm now doing those types of lives on Patreon exclusively so that I'm not canceled, I'm not silenced or shut down. And the other part of that is to fund my calling because I am attempting to do this full time, and that requires funds in the real world. So, if you guys want to support my message, if you believe that this is the truth and that it needs to get out there to the world, the Patreon channel is a good place to do that. It's also the place for the inner circle for those who want to be more intimately connected with this body of work, with this message, and with the inner workings of the community of it. All of that is on Patreon, and I'm working on building right now what I'm calling the Council of 12, the true inner order of my work, and that is designed to be the pillars of um, my entire body of work. I'm looking for individuals who want to be a part of what I'm doing here. And I don't just mean with the content and everything. My goal, my calling, and my mission is to bring the new earth into existence. It is to raise the collective vibration of the collective consciousness, right? To lay the groundwork, to sow seeds of awakening and help other people down their path. Yes, but to actually physically take action and bring about these changes in the world. And I know that I can't do that on my own, right? But I have this vision that I want to build, and I'm getting that off the ground on Patreon for anybody who wants to be a part of that. But there is a degree of responsibility that comes along with that, helping initiate that change and helping to steer where we go next, the topics that I go deep into, and in what venues, and how we proceed moving forward, how we make these things a reality. So if you are interested in that, um, some of the details are on Patreon, or you can reach out to me directly. But just know I've just started the Patreon thing. It's been around for, I think, 48 hours now. So now is a good time to get in on the ground floor, the ground level of that, if you want to be a part of building this into reality. I would absolutely love for you guys to be a part of that. But if not, I absolutely love you being a part of this in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be through monetary contribution. You guys being here and interacting with me and being here gives me a platform. If nobody was here, I would not be here either, right? So, um, you guys being here with your comments and your likes and sharing this out, and um, commenting and liking and sharing the videos and all of that, that helps get my message out to the world. And that is support. And I greatly appreciate that. So I don't want you to think in any way, shape, or form that I don't greatly value that, because I do. Yes, it's Magi Rising on Patreon. That is my brand name wherever you go, whether it is my website, magirising.com, TikTok, YouTube, Patreon, every single bit of it is Magi Rising. And actually, the website is probably the easiest place to go because it's got links for every single bit of it right there at the top. You can just click on it and it will take you there. There's also excellent resources that are 100% free if you guys want to benefit from that. And I'm continually trying to add more to that. There's the research compendium that is a collection of all of the research that I've done in the last 20 years on the topic of the polar reversal, the science of it, the history of it, the evidence, that kind of thing. But there's also a real-time data dashboard where you can track the cycle in real time. You can track what's going on in the sun with the earth changes, earthquakes, volcanoes, the evolution of the magnetic field. Um, about every single bit of information I could get my hands on is built into this dashboard, and that is there, and it is a free resource for everybody to use. So thank you all so much. Thank you all for being here and for being a part of this. And again, thank you for the gift of this platform, which enables me to fulfill my calling. So thank you all so much. I love each and every one of you, and I hope everyone has a beautiful night. I'll see you all soon. Good night.